So we are now streaming online, and this evening I'm going to continue with chapter 12 of Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which is Dr. Carl Jung's memoir of his psychological development. And chapter 12 is entitled Late Thoughts, and we're beginning on page 347 of this paperback edition of Memories, Dreams, Reflections. The question is, I never know where to put it. There it is. All right. So last week, there came up this issue of whether the ego possesses the source of energy, the source of psychic energy, or not, and if not, who does? And this is sort of one of those who's on first issues. And so let me read the last sentence that we read before the end. So Dr. Jung was talking about the self, the gods, and he says this, as it approaches consciousness, it first appears projected in figures like mana, gods, demons, etc., whose noumen seems to be the vital source of energy, and in point of fact is so as long as these supernatural figures are accepted. But as these fade and lose their force, the ego, that is the empirical man, seems to come into possession of this source of energy, and does so in the fullest meaning of this ambiguous statement. On the one hand, he seeks to seize this energy, to possess it, and even imagines that he does possess it. And on the other hand, he is possessed by it. Okay, so this is a fundamental idea in Jungian psychology, of course, that the self is the boss and not the ego. But many a man thinks that his ego is in charge. So now I'm reading on with some new information. This grotesque situation can, to be sure, occur only when the contents of consciousness are regarded as the sole form of psychic existence. Where this is the case, there is no preventing inflation by projections coming home to roost. But where the existence of an unconscious psyche is admitted, the contents of projection can be received into the inborn instinctive forms which predate consciousness. Their objectivity and autonomy are thereby preserved and inflation is avoided. The archetypes which are pre-existent to consciousness and condition it appear in the part they actually play in reality as a priori structural forms of the stuff of consciousness. Okay, so maybe we should stop there. Let me read the rest of this paragraph and then we'll go back. They do not in any sense represent things as they are in themselves, but rather the forms in which things can be perceived and conceived. Naturally, it is not merely the archetypes that govern the particular nature of its perceptions. They account only for the collective component of a perception. As an attribute of instinct, they partake of its dynamic nature and consequently possess a specific energy which causes or compels definite modes of behavior or impulses. That is, they may, under certain circumstances, have a possessive or obsessive force, numinosity, that's in parentheses. The conception of them as daimonia is therefore quite in accord with their nature. Okay, so you want to talk about that at all, Miles, or shall we go on? Or Thomas? Basically, what he's saying is, and we've described an archetype many times, it's like a dry riverbed that requires energy to be constellated, to be operational. And once that energy comes, then there's a structure of how that energy is used. So the simple example is the mother, a young girl who's not yet a mother, doesn't have that archetype constellated. But as soon as she has a baby, then the energy flows through the riverbed of motherhood, if you will, and it doesn't stop until the energy stops, which for a mother is never. And for others, some of the energy can be moved off in other places, and it can be obsessive. So any questions or thoughts about that? We can move on.
Well, I would think of the fact that in nature you can see ducks, and the mother duck is constantly looking after these little baby ducks. We have a pond just down the path.
Right.
And as you said numerous times, that is the most powerful archetype that you know of. And that's really, and you see that in any human mother as well. It's just, if there was a mother that just didn't care about her child, we would say, well, she's seriously disturbed. And I'm just wondering, as a man, you've talked about the warrior archetype, but is that the strongest archetype that we can identify with? Is that the best we've got as men? The father archetype, I suppose, is maybe something that needs to be better defined for us. Well, women seem to have it well defined.
Mary Stein made the comment once that that Jung really thought that there was only one archetype, and that archetype was the self. And so and the self can be both in the collective and in the individual. And let's see, there's some chats going on here too, so I should look at that. Okay, so Thomas, we're on page 347 of Memory Streams Reflections. For a man, you can never escape that self archetype. Okay, and for a woman, that self archetype assumes the image of motherhood once she has a baby. And for a man, maybe the energies that flow through the self archetype get more diverse. They become tributaries to the mighty Nile River or something like that. But usually by warrior we mean that when a man reaches puberty, let's say, he has to somehow prove himself as a man. And that doesn't mean that he has to join the Marines and go off to war. It means that he has to prove himself as a man. And so all of my friends who didn't go to Vietnam, they proved themselves no less perfectly than I did. if I did perfectly, but they certainly were no less men because they had to stand for what they believed in. So they became warriors for their ideas and their convictions. And, that's how they became men. And, you know, and, and, there are many other examples. And Thomas says there's several warrior poses in modern yoga practice, not incidentally Virabhadasana. Okay, warrior pose. Yeah, I'm sure that that's true. I haven't come to them yet in the Bhagavad Gita, or I'm sorry, in the Yoga Sutras. I'm looking at the Yoga Sutras for yoga practices right now, but I know that they're there, and they're in the second, third pada, especially the third quarter of the Yoga Sutras. So Melissa Townsend, who we spoke to a couple of weeks back and whose video is on the YouTube channel, she has addressed the sutras, but she hasn't gotten to the third quarter of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali when it's talking specifically about power. I'm looking forward to that. That's promised. Her book on that is to be published in time for Christmas. Let's hope. and and Thomas says in India there's also a female warrior, Durga. They are not in Patanjali, but show up in later Asana works. Those were beautiful images Melissa produced. Yes, surely they were, and they are. And I'm continuing to work with them, and I'm finding them very useful in terms of my meditation practice. And in a little while, I'll talk more about why. Well, since we're talking about this, let me just say that I'm coming around to a time when I'm going to offer some logos for young men. and males will think that's crazy, but having heard me yak about this for the last 5 years, but what is the problem since 85% of the viewership of this YouTube channel is young men between 18 and 44. So let's just consider for a moment, what are those young men facing? Well, quite simply, they're facing chaos. Thomas says, I feel so old. You and me both, Thomas. But so what do young men face? Always, but now especially, what they face is chaos because today we have so much information, we're awash in it. And the comment that I often refer to is that the man of the 16th century had no more information in a lifetime than is in the New York Times Sunday edition, 1 week's worth of the Sunday edition. And so while that's a lot of information, if it's spread over a lifetime, it's not a hell of a lot of information. And so, but since then, we've gotten more and more and more knowledge and information, and people have to get PhDs to get ahead in life if you're going to be a professional and so on. Or in my case, I had to get a JD and an MBA, and I'm not using either one of them. And so I've gone way beyond that. But but why? I was always looking for a way to make sense of the chaos. And uh, it dawned on me when we were listening to Melissa and I've looked at her books, um, that the thing that we need more than anything is to be able to detach ourselves from the chaos and look back at it. And that's done through meditation. And um, and so, thank you from South Africa. Thank you so much. Nice to see you. Um, and so that's what meditation does. And mind you, I've been studying Tibetan Buddhist style meditation for 26 years. And, I always regarded it as a way to get in touch with my unconscious, to under to hear myself think, to hear myself, so that I would pull myself out of the chaos and just meditate for a period of time. And it finally dawned on me that um, that's what everyone needs to do. We all need to be able to pull ourselves out of that craziness. But then what? Okay, does it mean that we should become little Tibetan Buddhist or Hindu monks or yoga teachers? Not on your life. And I don't think that at all. And so, but what I think it does mean is that we have to be able to first detach ourselves from the chaos and hear our own selves think. Then it's my thought, and this is again working with Melissa Townsend, that with her next session that's going to be on August the 8th, um, is to teach the tarot cards in a different way. Because what the tarot cards do, or what the I Ching does also, is that they offer the typical patterns of life, the typical things that can happen to you in a lifetime, and the people that you meet. So in the tarot, um, the major arcana are the typical, the first 9 or 10, counting the Fool, the first 10 cards of the major arcana are um, people that you meet mainly and how they interact with you, or, sort of big picture archetypal events. Then the number 10 card is the Wheel of Fortune, which basically is you get everything worked out in your life, and then all of a sudden the economy crashes, or there's a coronavirus pandemic, and it's the Wheel of Fortune spins, and whether you get ahead or not depends on how that Wheel of Fortune then stops, and we're all facing that right now. And then the next 11 or 12 cards of the, I guess it's 11 more cards of the major arcana, are basically cards about either they're either spirituality, evil, or um, troubles with the logos, basically. That's what the number 14 card is, the Tower. And so there are ways of spiritually looking at these things from in a detached way. And so that's all well and good, but then the suits basically cover the four um, the four the four types. So sensing, intuitive, thinking, and feeling are covered in the suits of the minor arcana. And the typical things that happen to a person in their lifetime are contained in those suits. So rather than doing a tarot reading, which is where you just throw the cards up in the air or you shuffle them very well and then deal them out, and you know nobody knows where they're going to come out, and it is sort of like the Wheel of Fortune, and then a gifted reader reads them. What I could do is teach what these cards are saying, which is a fairly easy thing to think about and remember. Okay, so that there's 78 major cards, of which 56 are the minor arcana. There are 14 in each suit, and then the cards reversed is another 78 cards. So it's the opposite of whatever the card is, let's say, or it's a lesser strength of the front side. So my idea is to teach people very basic things, which is 78 items. Here's 22 major people or situations that you're going to run into in your lifetime. That's the major arcana. And here are 56 typical events of a lifetime. And they're divided into 14 cards for each suit. And so you can see where you are. Okay, if you take them in, you don't have to take them in order, but if you know something about them, then you can say, oh yeah, okay, that's the Seven of Swords that's happening to me right now, and you can really see it. And you really wouldn't have to teach the reverse, because the reverse is just the opposite. So you could think of it as, a polarity, a duality, and it's either very good or very bad in your situation. And so it would be a way to quickly think, where am I right now in my life? If I got knocked off my horse for some reason, I don't know where I am in life, what do I need to do to get going? Okay. And it seems to me that that sort of very rough and simple way of thinking about the types of things that come up in a lifetime would at least put people in a way that they can sort of know where they are within this chaos, which in the 16th century was one edition of the Sunday New York Times, but in the 20th century was lots of different things. And then at the end of the 20th century, in the early 21st century, we have the internet, which opens up every piece of information in the world, basically, to every single person who can't possibly use it. And so, but you still have the same life, and the same fundamentals apply, which is you have to know where you are. Because if you know where you are, then you know what you have to do to get someplace. Okay, I'm going to shut up. Miles or Thomas, do you have some thoughts about that?
I have some thoughts, but Thomas, go ahead if you'd like to say anything right now.
So Thomas has asked the question, immaculate random makes the cards fall as they do, correct? Yes. Immaculate random is Kurt Vonnegut's term, however. There are still words which, when one searches for them on Google, nothing is found, magic words. Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. And lots of things are mystical. A lot of times they're mystical because we just don't know what the word means. you know, when you're a child, you don't necessarily know the names of the things even in your household. And so it's always a mystery. And the more you know, the less mystery you have, let's say. Um, and so a tarot reading, a divination with the tarot, um, what that does is it's like a it's like a simple, it's like a low resolution psychotherapy. Okay, because in a in a and Deborah Bowman Stevens has asked me what deck I use. I have a lot of decks here. I'll show them in a few minutes, um, but the reason it's low resolution because you're figuring out for yourself um, what it's saying, and the card reader is figuring out, but the card reader isn't talking to you. The card reader isn't diving into your life. The card reader may know you, know something about your life, but nothing like a psychotherapist would do. I mean, if a psychotherapist would do what's called an anamnesis, which means that they would take, you know, a whole lot of things like the cognition test the president took and many other things and get a picture of your psyche. And they're trained to know what a picture of your psyche should look like. But a tarot reader isn't necessarily trained in that. They're trained in how to read the cards. And so what they're doing is they're presenting some ideas which may link to your life. Like um, if I say the high priestess, okay, well, the high priestess is a virgin woman, let's say, like the Oracle of Delphi or something like that. And so that may have certain connotations to you. And so if you if the reader were to say, you know, a young woman is going to come into your life and she's going to seem very mysterious, then your psyche is anchored in such a way that if that is true, you're going to connect with it. Okay. And so after, and if you go through a card reading, you're going to hear a bunch of things, and some will apply to you and most will not. But if three or four hit bang on, um, then it may cause you to rethink some things in your own psyche. Okay, it's not the card reader going into your psyche and you know rummaging around in there and trying to find things that may be blockages for you. Instead, it's you taking what the card reader says, just words, a conversation like we're having right now is like that. Um, you know, because as I say things to both my panel here and the people that are online on YouTube, um, as I say certain words, they make you think. You think in images. So you think, oh well, okay, high priestess. What does that mean to me? And you don't think it consciously, but you when I say those words, it has a certain connotation to everybody. They're all different. Um, and language is like that. So if I say any word, we'll all have a different image for that word. I mean, my favorite one is to say the word yacht. Well, yacht is one of 12 words in the English language that come from the Dutch. And it literally means small boat. If you translate Dutch into English, it means small boat, which doesn't have much mystery to it, you know, and, you know, it sounds dull. But if I say yacht, then boy, you could imagine Bezos's yacht or someone like that. And some of these guys from Microsoft and Apple, you know, they have 500-foot yachts, and those are quite different. And so so everybody has a different idea when I say the word yacht, and that applies to almost every word you say. And so uh, you create an image in your mind as someone talks through something, and uh, and so what the tarot reader does in a divination is only try to click ideas in your mind, and then you move those around. You contemplate or meditate on those, on that reading maybe over the next week, and it might change your attitude or your perspective about something. So that's what a divination does. But I'm not talking about doing a divination right now. I'm just talking about the fact that the cards themselves offer a roadmap for life. And so if you are in a tough spot or in a confusing spot, you can go and, first of all, take yourself out of it by meditating so that the chaos is out over here. And by meditating, you keep the chaos outside yourself. And then, oh, by the way, you can pick up this roadmap. And if you understand how the roadmap works, you can understand um, what is going to happen in your life. So, anyway, Miles, do you have any thoughts about that?
I certainly do. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I am remembering back to when you read the I Ching for me in the advanced reading group. I still have that. And it really resonated. In fact, you were concerned that you might not have correctly read, precisely according to the book, the way I forget the figures or the sticks line up. Yeah. The hexagram has to supposed to be read. But at the end of it, it didn't matter because it's whatever you said, whatever you wanted to present, it made me manifest or brood and incubate on, okay, how do I incorporate that? What's it telling me and how do I connect to it? So I think it's a great idea because it activates what is, under the surface in a person and brings it forward. It's a conversation starter in a sense.
It's a conversation with your life, with yourself.
Yeah. And then as you have pointed out once before as well, that, combine that with the coin flip. So if someone's struggling with it, well, flip a coin. And well, if obviously, as you said, if you flip the coin and you're thinking, well, let's do 2 out of 3. Okay, well, that's telling you right now what you need. So anyway, I think it's so important, because I think fathers like myself, to communicate with my son or my daughter, the same thing could be developed in parallel. Maybe a woman would step forward and do the same thing, a modern deck of cards for feminine, for the female.
Now, aside from that, in order to prepare for the Melissa Townsend session on August the 8th, I have decided to brush up on my tarot reading, which I'm a quite passable tarot reader if I'm up to speed again. And so I've been bringing myself up to speed by doing a reading for the President of the United States every day. How's your day going to be, sir? And so I've been doing that, and I could share today's reading. Shall I share today's reading for the President?
Sure, go ahead.
Should be good.
I won't get involved in the conversation. I will respect your sovereignty since I'm in Canada, but please go ahead.
Okay, so what happened in this reading is, let's see, I wonder did I get it onto if I got it onto my photos, I should be able to show it to you. Ah, yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay. Um, so let's see if
I have to step away and get another microphone. I'll be right back.
okay. All right, go ahead. I'm gonna share my screen, and the way I'm going to do that is by this. No, that didn't work. Let's see. I'm going to share my tarot reading for the president here. And here it is. All right. So this is the reading. I was using the Rider Waite deck for this reading. And what you see right away here is that there are a lot of cards upside down. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards reversed, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these cards. Um, 5 of these cards relate to creativity, to the suit of wands. And so, that's right away a giveaway that the president has some serious trouble with creativity right now. And so, um, then let's see if I have my reading itself. Okay. So hopefully you're still seeing this. Um, and so the way I read this was the number 1 card. Well, maybe I should put back the layout itself first, and I'll read it off my Twitter. So the number 1 and the number 2 card, this is the significator. And this is like the 9 of wands, but it's like all the creativity and so on has gone bad because this is an upside down 9 of wands, and it's crossed by the 4 of pentacles. And the 4 of pentacles sort of represents a miser. And so I read this as ideas have gone bad, and miserliness might be a factor. Okay, that's what I said. And then the sun above, that's what's in your, um, you know, controlling your world right now. That suggests clarity, and everything's bright and sunny, except that this is reversed. So I read this as no clarity currently. And then this is what's the foundation of this problem. So this no clarity, the foundation of the problem is the anima of ideas is not supporting you. This is the Queen of Wands, and so she kind of represents the anima of creativity or ideas, and she's not supportive right now. And so then this card, the number 5 card, is the 5 of Cups, which represents not being very happy, as you can see here. And he's turned his back on cups that are still full, and he's only facing toward cups that are empty. And so I read that as not happy lately, can't see the choices really. And then this is the future card, and this is a very, very positive card. This is the 10 of Cups, which means the potential for future happiness is great. Okay, that's what that card means. And then what does it take to get there? Well, or where are you that this could happen, this great happiness? And the card that came up is Temperance. This is a major arcana arcanic card, and so it says very simply, if you want to be happy, you're going to have to be temperate. But then the reading turns very bad because um, number 8 is sort of um, the environment, and basically I read this with the 2 as the idea partners or the creative partners have gone. They're not there anymore. And this card, the number 9 card, would represent hopes and fears, and so you're hoping that um, that new creativity would come. That's what the Ace of Wands would suggest: new intuitions or new creativity. But it's reversed, so that means nothing new is coming. And the 6 of Wands would be a very positive card, suggesting sort of the culmination of creativity, except it's reversed, and that's the outcome card. So I read that as more bad ideas. But I mean, it's really uncanny to read these things and see how they can apply to a specific individual. And that's how I
Well, I'll
read
just say that as you were reading that and describing each card, I was actually concentrating on what you're saying as if you had put those cards out for me.
it.
And it provokes thoughts of each card provoked a thought about my current situation and what it means or what I might need to do.
Right. And
so just as you said, you can throw the cards on the table and then start talking about it, and everybody can connect to it in their context and their circumstance, where they are and what they're working on and
precisely
what they're trying, where they're trying to get to.
Precisely. But my basic idea here, let Julie in. My basic idea here is that if people learn the basic story of the cards, then they can learn a lot about life. And the reason I especially got this was I bought a card deck a while back, which is oops, not that. Wait a minute.
While you're digging around, for example, the card that you had second from the end was about, the creativity, or the
I
something about creativity is coming to an end or something, or there's
right.
It's
so, I'm sorry I didn't hear what you said the last 20 seconds or so, because I pulled my plug here.
I was just saying while you're looking for your cards, I was thinking about, for example, the second last card, where it was something to the effect that your creativity, you've maxed out in a sense, and there's not really much more going to come that way. So, I related to that too in my situation, that I've been spending a lot of time listening and making notes and gathering insights and wisdom from all these sources, including you. And it's like, okay, enough's enough, get on with it.
Yeah, well, you could get to that point. So I have a set that's called the New Mythic Tarot. Maybe I should turn my virtual background off for a moment. All right, virtual background off. Okay, so now you can see it. The New Mythic Tarot. But what's important here is that this is by, among other people, Liz Green. Now, Liz Green is a Jungian analyst, and she is she's a very well-known astrologer as well. And so, interestingly, and our friend Nicole criticized me because I said, well, I hadn't opened this set. I bought this set back when I was playing with the tarot before, in 2017, when I did the 18 videos on the tarot. But I actually had never opened it. And to prove that, here's the set. And there was a book here. That book is out on my dining room table right now because I'm reading it. But I've never unpacked the cards. They're still in the plastic wrapper. But because I started to get back into the tarot because of Melissa Newton, or I'm sorry, Melissa Townsend. I also have a Melissa Newton in my life, but Melissa Townsend. Because of that, I decided, okay, well, let's look at Liz Green's set. So I got this set out, and I started to read the book. And actually, you can get the book called The New Mythic Tarot on Amazon for 27 bucks. And it's really worth it because it basically sort of sums up life in one place in a Jungian way. And so I really, really liked the book. I haven't looked at all the cards yet, although the cards look interesting. But the book basically is talking about these archetypal factors, and then it talks about the four suits. So the book for this is really a valuable thing to learn something about life, in my opinion.
Does it instruct about the concepts of Jung as you go along?
No. And in fact, you would not know by reading this that Liz Green is a Jungian analyst. Okay.
The one thing, though, that I would just like your thoughts on, though, would it not be really a great way to, at the same time, introduce people to the concepts that Jung created? You know, all the different terms and definitions, just to get people thinking that way.
Yeah, if I start to teach this as a roadmap for life, then we will inevitably do that. Okay, as we talk through it. And that's what I'm thinking of doing, actually, is after we complete this Memories, Dreams, Reflections series, which may have a few more weeks to go, I'm thinking of doing this for sort of like the fall term, because I think it could be very good. And as I say, I really like this book. Now, let me put it away. The reason I have to is because it's sort of a lifetime endeavor, and Debbie Stevens has commented that she collects decks, and so I have a number of decks that I've been using lately, and I'll just give you a couple of samples, show you a couple of examples. And what's interesting about this is each of these series of cards brings the same ideas. In other words, you would use the same basic ideas that are in Liz Green's book, but you would use it with a different image so that it would make you sort of amplify your thinking about that particular card or that particular circumstance in your life. So for example, this is called Mystic Mondays Tarot. Okay, so there's the Seven of Cups. Okay, just as an as an example. And for example, here is the Seven of Swords. The Seven of Swords is always about swords behind you. You don't know what's going on behind your back. Your friends might have the swords out against you. So the president has gotten this a few times. There's 6 swords around this woman, and she's holding the 7th one there. And so here's the 6 of Swords is very symbolic, right? And then here is the Chariot. And that's quite different from the Chariot on the Rider-Waite deck, but it's very obviously the Chariot. And if you're a reader, you know what the Chariot means. And so
now, would you be ready to say invite people to call in? You'd lay out the cards, and would you be able to read them in real time, or do you need to brush up on it?
No, I can read them in real time. And in fact,
because it might be really interesting to try to connect to people who do listen in but don't call in on any of the panels, but maybe they'd be agreeable or would like to have a one-on-one, and you would introduce them and learn about them. What are they working on? What's exciting them? And do the reading, just to do, as you've said, to not for divination, but just simply to get people, especially young men, to start thinking about where they want to go.
Yeah.
And then if you recorded it, you could say, well, if you're agreeable, we all post it, much like our friend Paul Vanderklay does.
Right. Well, I'm not sure I would post anybody's private reading, but I might do a generic reading. So I'll say, okay, we're going to do another famous person, let's say. And so this is another deck called the Everyday Tarot deck. And so let's just see what comes up if I do a 1-card reading for Hillary Clinton. And so what I got was the 4 of Cups. There it is. And moreover, it's reversed. It's upside down. There it is, the 4 of Cups. And so the point of this card is that she is basically in a good place emotionally, but she could have more. Right before I came in here, Deb said, I wonder if she would serve as Secretary of State again if she was asked. And, maybe that's, that card would reflect that idea. Who knows? Okay. So I'll just show another one. This is this Everyday Tarot deck. And so this is the 9 of Pentacles. And so this is a lady who has everything going for her. Everything's coming up roses and crowns. And she's got a beautiful, peaceful bird on her finger. And everything is going well because it's all about money. That's what all the coins are here. And so that's that. Okay, I'm just showing Debbie Stevens the variety of decks I have here. And what I'm not going to show is I'm not going to show Melissa Townsend's decks. And Melissa Townsend has painted 2 separate decks of tarot, and she's going to present those to us on August the 8th. So I will, and that is a Saturday, and it's a session that begins at 10 p.m. U.S. Eastern time, but for Miles, I think you're in mountain time, right, Miles? So for you, it'll be 8 p.m. It'll be a nice time to have. Okay, but here's another deck that I really am enjoying right now. And this is called the Cosmic Tarot. And so here's the Princess of Cups in the Cosmic Tarot. And I really love the paintings in this particular deck. And so here's the Five of Cups where things aren't going too well. And let's see. Okay, here's the Wheel of Fortune. I opened it upside down, so it would be reversed on a reading. But with the Wheel of Fortune, it really doesn't matter if you're at the top or the bottom, right? Because you give it a spin and away you go. And so, yes, Miles, as you say, and I've said a few times, that if I were to go into a auditorium with 1,000 people and simply throw the cards across the stage, my reading would have meaning for every single one of them, right? That's inevitable. Now here's another whimsical, and this is a shadow side tarot deck called the Deviant Moon Tarot. And I can say that this is really bent, seriously bent. For example, here is the Knight of Wands, just to give you a sense of it. And so that's the Knight of Inspiration. And so here were some earlier versions of the same card by the same artist. He wrote this whole book about the process of doing these tarot cards. But for example, here is the Queen of Cups. So the Queen of Cups should be a woman who's really got her emotions under control and everything is hunky-dory. But as you can see, it's kind of a strange image. And so I haven't really started to use this deck yet. I have it. And for example, here's the Eight of Pentacles. It's got a little workman in a little factory, and he's pounding away on coins, right? And so, but oh, what a workman he is. So, so the point about that is that if you know what the tarot are and what this map of a lifetime is, you really can sort of enjoy these cards and use them in not in a divination way, but just as a way to understand where you are. Like here's the devil. It's quite a dramatic devil. And let's see if he's got any workups. Okay, he did a bunch of devils when he was a child. And so here's some of his devil images from when he was a child that he put in his book just for fun. So anyway, that's the Deviant Moon Tarot, but it's fascinating. Yeah, hold on a sec. So anyway, my thought is that if I were to teach sort of a basic, more fun tarot deck as sort of a roadmap for life and not as a divination, that, I mean, I really love this Cosmic Tarot deck. Like here's the moon, and you can see that it's got fish in the moon, which represents Pisces, and it's like a yin yang thing. See that? And the crab or the lobsters looking up at the moon, so on. So a lot of interesting ideas here. And so the idea is simply to give people a roadmap for life. And then it's something also that you can explore throughout your lifetime and enjoy. And so on the 8th of August, Melissa Townsend is going to talk to us about the Tarot and present her two Tarot decks, which are quite interesting. I have them both here, but I'm not going to spoil Melissa's thunder by showing those to you as yet. So Brendan asked this question: what is seminal retention, and how does that express itself for a woman? Well, I think those are probably things that are a little bit more detailed for anatomy than I really want to get into. But I mean, seminal retention would be not expressing out the product of your prostate gland, I guess we could say it in a circumspect way. And for a woman, it might be not expressing out your natural lubricant without going into any greater detail than that. And Deborah says that she likes the Jung deck very much. I'm not sure I have seen the Jung deck. I'll have to look for that on on Amazon. But anyway, the purpose here tonight is to go on with Memory Streams Reflection. So just I've given you an advanced hint about what I'm thinking about for the fall.
Just one more thing I'll say as we were talking about that there's the very strong, definite mother archetype, but for men, we're maybe not, we can't necessarily grab onto a particular archetype as strong as that. The warrior archetype came to mind, but as we had a conversation once before, you said, in your experience, men join the military not to go to war, but to serve and for the peace. So perhaps the archetype to start to present to men is peacemaker warrior.
Yeah.
And put that up front, the peacemaker warrior. So we still retain the warrior, but it's predicated with the concept of the peacemaker.
Yeah, I actually gave a sermon once in my Reformed church up in Rochester, New York, or Greece, New York, on Blessed is the Peacemaker. And it happened that I gave this sermon on Armed Forces Day, and so I was saying that soldiers are peacemakers. People that are in the military want peace. They don't want war. Who wants to die? But somebody has to know how to, and so Jung used to say all the time, in times of peace, train for war, and in times of war, sue for peace. So anyway, all right, let me read on here. So Thomas, before he left, said that he used the Marseille deck, which is reputed to be the oldest tarot deck, and it is available on Amazon, among others. I don't happen to have a copy of it. Justin says, what can you help articulate about the Godhead insofar as it's referring to an actual vision? Well, it very often is an actual vision. And it's the way your psyche sometimes presents the self. And that's, if you look at all the major events in the Holy Bible, you will always see either a vision of the Godhead or an emissary of the Godhead. I mean, okay, so the Archangel Gabriel or whoever came and talked to the Virgin Mary, but actually it's an emissary of the self, and these things are all part of that. So let me read on another chapter here, or not another chapter, another paragraph, and see how far we get. All right, so if anyone is inclined to believe that any aspect of the nature of things is changed by such formulations, he is being extremely credulous about words. The real facts do not change, whatever names we give them. Only we ourselves are affected. If one were to conceive of God as pure nothingness, that has nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that a superordinate principle, the fact of a superordinate principle. So you can say that God is nothing, but nonetheless, God doesn't pay any attention to you on that one. And we are just as much possessed as before. The change of name has removed nothing at all from reality. At most, we have taken a false attitude toward reality if the new name implies a denial. On the other hand, a positive name for the unknowable has the merit of putting us into a correspondingly positive attitude. If, therefore, we speak of God as an archetype, we are saying nothing about his real nature, but are letting it be known that God already has a place in that part of our psyche, which is pre-existent to consciousness, and that he, therefore, cannot be considered an invention of consciousness. We neither make him more remote nor eliminate him, but bring him closer to the possibility of being experienced. This latter circumstance is by no means unimportant, for a thing which cannot be experienced may easily be suspected of non-existence. Let's see. This suspicion is so inviting that so-called believers in God see nothing but atheism in my attempt to reconstruct the primitive unconscious psyche. Or if not atheism, then Gnosticism, anything, heaven forbid, but a psychic reality like the unconscious. If the unconscious is anything at all, it must consist of earlier evolutionary stages of our conscious psyche. The assumption that man in his whole glory was created on the sixth day of creation without any preliminary stages is, after all, somewhat too simple and archaic to satisfy us nowadays. There is pretty general agreement on that score. In regard to the psyche, however, the archaic conception holds on tenaciously. The psyche has no antecedents. It is tabula rasa, arises anew at birth, and is only what it imagines itself to be. Okay, so Jung has been criticized by some that he recreated the Greek gods. Okay, and in point of fact, he did, but he identified them as complexes within the psyche. And so when a young woman is overtaken by the goddess Aphrodite, she becomes very appealing and seductive because she's trying to find a mate. Uh, and but then after she has a couple of kids and she's building up a household, then she becomes more like a queen who has her own domain and is guiding her household and holding it together. And for a man, the same sorts of things happen. I mean, some days you have to be peaceful, and some days you have to fight a war. And I always, how does this happen for us? Well, for the longest time, until I was like 34 years old, I was conscious of something which I called the combat officer's phenomenon. Okay, now what I meant by that was that some people who had been military officers serving in combat were never afraid. And for example, Patton and MacArthur are quite famed for having walked out in front of uh, their front lines on a number of occasions, and nobody shot them. and they never expected to be shot, and they never showed any fear to do that. And, I served in Vietnam, and there wasn't 1 minute that I wasn't afraid during that year or 9 months that I was there. And so I never had this experience that these big generals had had. And I wanted to understand what that was. And then when I was in Japan, I was doing something that I had a big fight with this vice president of my company back in the US. And we were doing this by telex. And so this is back in the days long before faxes and things. This is when the way you communicated internationally was you sent a message that traveled at 55 characters per minute, click, 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 like that. And the way you created this message was you had to, on something that sort of looked like a typewriter, you created a tape. And it was a cardboard tape or heavy stock tape that you then ran through the machine, and it would click, 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 send the message across. And that's what a teletype machine used to be like. And so in the days that I was in Japan, we were using telex. And so by that time, we had telex right available in our office, but a couple of times I remember being in China and the hotel didn't even have telex, so I had to go to the actual International Telegraph Office to send a telex and I had to go into the International Telegraph Office in China, type out the telex myself, and put it through the machine. That's how things were in 1985. So in the years before that, in 1980 to 84, we totally communicated across the world in this telex to communicate in writing. And we could telephone, but it was very expensive. So I had a monthly phone bill at that time of $2,000 a month. But besides that, I sent a lot of telexes, as today we send lots of emails, right? And so I was having this fight with this vice president. And the way it started was I got a telex from him that was like 2 sentences, and it challenged everything I had done in Japan for the previous 2 years in those 2 sentences. That was how succinct and precise they were. It was like, you're not worth the powder to blow you to hell, Skip, and we're going to yank you out of Japan, something like that. And so I sat down and I wrote a 4-page telex. So you can imagine it coming out of the machine on the other end. It's just pages and pages of, and it was rolls. So this long roll of paper would be coming out of the telex machine on the other end. And I remember being at headquarters several times. And in the morning, you'd come in and there'd be telexes from all 16 all 32 production centers, including 16 that were international. And so there'd be like 100 telexes, and they'd be across the floor in this uncut piece of paper that came out on a roll. And so you had to cut it apart. And so he said, he had challenged me, and I sent him this 4-page telex. And I go, oh boy, I don't know who's going to get fired, him or me. Okay, one of us is going to get fired. And so then the next day I come in and there's another 2-sentence telex, which challenged everything that I had said on my previous 4 pages. So I sat down again and I sent this really long telex. I probably would have been 6 or 8 pages. And at 55 characters a minute, it took quite a long time to feed it through the machine. Click, 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 right? And coming out on the other end, of course. And I said, well, now I know I've had it. And but anyway, I told him what I thought. I let him have it right between the eyes. And the next day, I didn't hear anything from him, but I heard from the general counsel of the company, who sent a 1-word telex, dynamite. Because apparently my telex hit home, and I never heard from that vice president again. And so he was trying to take me out, and I think I might have taken him out in this exchange. But it's like it being in battle and not having been killed, And so after that, I never held back from, saying what I thought in my telexes, being very clear. And so I passed this mysterious, hidden moment when I didn't care anymore. And it's very much like the numinous experience or the religious experience that we've been talking about for years, where for a long time you worry about, well, should I believe in God or not? And then something will happen, and all of a sudden you say, oh, I see, I know. I don't have to believe in God. I know. And you pass that moment. And once you pass that moment, you never are going to go back. Right. And so it's a moment like Zen. And I sort of recognized it when I took a class on Zen one weekend and wanted to understand what was going on. And a guy explained it very simply this way. When you're learning to type, as long as you have to think about where the letters are, you can't type. But as soon as you get to the point where you've mastered it in such a way that you no longer think about where the letters are, then you can type. Then you've mastered it. Okay, the same with riding a bicycle. As long as you have to think about balancing and steering and pedaling, you can't ride a bicycle. But as soon as you can stop thinking about that and just do it, then you can ride a bicycle. Okay, because once you can ride a bicycle, and most of us know this, most of us that are watching this program, and there are a few on YouTube and we three, once you can ride a bicycle, um, then you never think about pedaling or balancing or steering as a process. You just do it, and so that's what knowing God is like. Exactly that. So
Yeah, and as I thought, about what you've said numerous times in that regard, um, so related to the peacemaker warrior archetype concept, I could have said there's an archetype of Jesus Christ that could be presented, but in the Bible, it says, he says himself, I'm going to leave so I can get out of the way.
right.
So that's why, the peacemaker warrior archetype is better than me saying, well, let's consider the Christ archetype. And so I guess what I'm saying is I've read the Bible myself and I read it differently, but it allows me to know that the people that are trying to say it's all about Jesus have got it, in my opinion, the way I read it, wrong, because he himself has said, I need to get out of the way to send a Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
So let's drop this whole concept that the Bible is all about Jesus. Let's talk about it's all about the values.
Yeah.
And whether you're secular or Christian, he doesn't care, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And he knew that it wasn't about him. He said so. He in effect said so. If he had said it was about him, he could have had a worldly kingdom. Okay, he could have, at the very minimum, he could have led a bunch of people out in the desert and created a kingdom of his own in those times. And, so he could have been a king on earth, but what he was trying to get across to people is how you have to live your life. You have to live your life with conviction, and that, this is, you don't just go around and tell people that's all logos, this is what I believe, this is what I believe, this is what I believe. Well, so what? You know, Reza Aslan said at one point that if Jesus had just been a Zedek, which was a kind of Jewish teacher in those days, he would have been forgotten entirely. But he knew that if he was going to make an impact, he had to embody what he knew. He had to physically embody it up to and including the crucifixion, and in order to um, present what he was presenting to the Jews of that time. And he knew what the result would be. And um, in the Garden of Gethsemane, when the angel came to him, he had asked God 3 times whether he really had to go through with it. Okay, that was the human being part of him that was saying, "Well, do I really have to do this?" And the answer is, yeah. In the end, but stick to your guns, and the result will be good. it's basically the same message that the Bhagavad Gita gives us. Okay, the book that I'm reading with Kushbu on this YouTube channel is basically saying you have to do your duty. You have to, find a meaning for your life and then see it through no matter what. See it through to the end.
Yeah, and it's about be your version of the peacemaker warrior.
Sure.
And the problem with these Christian denominations that I've experienced, and there's good people there. I'm just saying I read the Bible differently. I'm not debating, but this concept of it's all about Jesus, that's the number one problem that creates passivity, which the American philosopher Sheldon Wolin said, passivity will be the downfall of civilization. Because if you're just sitting back, oh, I believe, I'm saved, that's not helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's good for you, man. Right. If you're not willing to build your life around what he believes, then you have to experience it for yourself. And we're going through that right now with the coronavirus. Okay, so half of the American people don't believe that they should be wearing masks, and they're in the process of getting a real experience of what it means when you don't wear a mask in these circumstances. And so, 10 years from now, if there's another pandemic, people are going to know a lot more about how they have to behave than they know right now. And, we haven't really seen anything yet. I mean, the flu of 1918 killed 50 million people globally, 50 million people globally. And it killed 650,000 in the US. So in the US right now, we're at 20% of the number that were killed in 1918 by the Spanish flu. And so, our problem is that our families have forgotten about how it had to be dealt with back then. And it wasn't until, I think it may be when my mother was on her deathbed, that she told me that my grandfather had been engaged to a woman who, together with her 4 sisters, 5 girls in one family, died on the same weekend from the Spanish flu. And as a result of that fact, we're having this conversation today, because I wouldn't have existed if those 5 women hadn't died. Okay, but but because I know that story and have known that story now for a few years, I'm much more respectful of possible pandemics. But most people don't know a story like that because it happened over 100 years ago, and there's nobody in their family that could tell that story, or has told it, or remembers to tell it, or whatever it is. And so, for the next 20 or 30 years, there will be a story to tell. But, as the memory dies out, then we have to relearn these lessons. And let's hope it's not too bad. That's all I can say. I know that my wife and mother-in-law and I are being extremely careful and judicious about what we do in the current environment. And so the point, and maybe this addresses Justin's point on the YouTube channel, is that is Winston Churchill's famous quote: "The Americans always do the right thing after trying everything else." So, maybe other governments won't try anything else. Like Bolsonaro in Brazil, he ignored it, and he's now got it. And uh, Boris Johnson ignored it, and he ended up in the ICU. And so now I think they probably have a greater respect for the flu. But here we have all these cowboys running around who think that they can do anything they want, and pretty soon they're going to see that they can't. I mean, in very short order, everybody in the United States and Canada will know somebody who's died from the flu, from the coronavirus. And I already know two. And and losing those two has changed my life quite dramatically, and it's actually changed the work that we do on this YouTube channel. So anyway, but gradually we'll get how many people in Canada? About 120 million or something.
Oh no, we're much smaller than that.
Oh,
We're about 37 million.
Okay.
So we're a little more than 1/10 the size of the United States. Here's something curious that I realized just the other day, because I'm interested in music, and like I'm a product of the 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm a boomer. And I'm pretty impressed with some of the rock bands that I know of, such as Bon Jovi, 5 million YouTube subscribers. And I thought, well, let's go over and check out BTS. How many YouTube subscribers do they have? They have 37 million YouTube subscribers. That is as if everyone in Canada subscribed to their YouTube channel. But anyway, a bit of a digression, but yeah, we are a very different country in many respects. And one of the things I'm of the opinion of is that although we are a constitutional monarchy and we still have a queen and king as the sovereign, no doubt everything that has transpired in history has provided us with a better version of a monarch than we would otherwise have, so
the best kind
everything
of
you've done helped us up here, to have
the best kind of monarch is one that's on the other side of the sea, right?
Well, yeah, in a sense, because strangely enough, she purposefully stays out of the fray, and her being over there in England, even though she does have the title Queen of Canada, she stays above the fray, and that's actually a very powerful thing in a sense, because she's always very careful what she says, and so consequently, there's a moral authority that, even though we have Quebec, which is French, and they're very, the history is still that they're very concerned about maintaining their French heritage. And then most of Canada is English speaking, but then we also have these Indigenous peoples and treaties. And the only reason that I think really the only glue that holds us together is the fact that we have this monarch that stays out of the fray, and we sort of have to keep things going along somehow, as opposed to separating into a whole bunch of chunks.
Well,
anyway, I digress on that.
No.
I just wanted to summarize and say that I think it's, thinking of, I learned a bit about Quaker history, and I learned about George Fox, an American who founded Pennsylvania. And he had the king at the time, George the Third, was it? This George Fox some debt or some money back in the mid 1600s, I guess because of the Civil War over in England. But anyway, fascinating history. And so anyhow, that's the Quaker people, who are also known as Friends. They, they would have influenced the king back then in the 1600s to again mold him into something that we now have today, not a dictatorial kind of a monarch, but a monarch that has to really keep things on an even keel, and because they want to retain their authority, and so they're striving to try to always be the mediator.
Yeah, I've been impressed by this program called The Crown, where it's now in its third season, I think, or it's about to have its third or fourth season, and it's supposed to be ultimately 60 programs or 6 seasons. But the first part of it has been very, very impressive in terms of what the monarch, the queen, has had to do to hold things together, literally. And part of it is that the prime ministers have to report to her. and so they don't think that they're the ultimate boss, unlike our president, who thinks he's the ultimate boss, which he isn't, because we are. And so I was hearing an interesting discussion today, because there's this worrisome argument that that Trump might refuse to leave office, and then I heard this morning that Nancy Pelosi has been briefed on the process for transitioning power from Trump to her. And I'm thinking, I wonder why that's happening. So I went back to the Constitution, and the Constitution is very clear that the term of office of a president is for 4 years, and it ends at noon on January the 20th. And so if there is no new president selected by then, in other words, if Trump were to contest the election and throw it into the courts, for example, then it doesn't take any action by anybody. As of noon next January 20th, he and Pence are out of office. They are no longer officials of the United States if there's no new president elected, and if they haven't been reelected. And so if there's no designated president by election, Trump and Pence are finished. Okay, they're literally finished by rule of the Constitution, and it's meet and right that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court swear in Nancy Pelosi as President of the United States at that point, because she's the next in line of succession. And so that's a very interesting point.
Yeah, and the 50 states, they just can carry on governing. And so, I suppose what you're saying is it's not necessarily an essential position.
Well, I mean, we have an order of succession. And
yeah,
so, yes, it is essential, but as of next January the 20th at 12 noon, neither Pence nor he can be it unless
the office is essential, but you don't necessarily, things aren't going to just shut down because nobody's sitting in the chair at 12 o'clock on January 20th.
And if they're out of office at that time because there's been no new president elected as yet. I mean, I'm assuming that there might be, if he were to contest the election, he may prevent um, a final selection of the president for a month or two or a year or two. But during that period, we would have a president, and that president would be Nancy Pelosi, very likely, unless she loses her election. But whoever's the Speaker of the House on the 20th of January next year, and there's every reason to believe that will be Nancy Pelosi, then at 1 minute after noon on the 20th of January, she will be the president of the United States and appropriate to be sworn in.
I'm just thinking back. I'm going back in history, and I'm not very clear on it, but with respect to the fact that there is an automatic hierarchy or protocol of chain of command, that if one person's missing, the next person steps up. I remember it was General or Colonel Haig. There was what was going on when he said, "I'm in charge"?
Well,
the president was missing or something?
No, it was when Reagan was shot. And so Reagan was,
okay,
in emergency surgery.
Where was the vice president? Who was vice president? Because he wasn't vice president.
No, it was H.W. Bush, George H.W. Bush.
Where was he?
Well, he wasn't handy. and so Alexander Haig wanted to just confirm that someone was in charge at that moment. Okay. And so, I mean, and Haig had been a 4-star general in the Army. So he knew the importance of establishing that there still was leadership in Washington, even though the president was incapacitated at that moment. But he was a little sketchy on the Constitution because he's the fourth or fifth in line. So it's the president, then the vice president, Speaker of the House, President pro tem of the Senate, and then the Secretary of State. So all those first 4 would have to be knocked out in order for the Secretary of State to be the president. But, obviously there is a chain of command in the U.S. government. And it's why, when there's a joint meeting of Congress, there's always one cabinet member who sits out away from the hall because he's the designated survivor. I mean, we've even had a multi-season television series about that. But anyway, I just thought it was an interesting factoid. And so we have one of our viewers on YouTube who was objecting to me having made political comments on this channel, and can please all the people some of the time, and some of them all of the time. Yes, Justin, you're right. If he wins again, he wins again. But whether he would leave voluntarily if he doesn't win is an open question. And the point is that if he challenges the election, then he challenges the election. And on January the 20th at noon, if the new president has not been selected by election, then the Speaker of the House will be the president. Simple as that. That's the way it works. And so Jaguar Focus says, so eventually who has the power? Well, it's the president that has the power, but because of the way the 20th Amendment of the US Constitution works, the term that our current president is in is a 4-year term, period. Okay. And that 4 years is literally over at noon on the 20th of January. And there's no authority for him to be the president after that time. And the only person at that point, if there's no elected president because it's contested, then both President Trump and President or Vice President Pence would be out of office. They would have no authority in the government any longer. And Nancy Pelosi would be the President of the United States, and if she's the Speaker of the House at that time. So anyway, I'm not expecting this to happen. In fact, I'm actually expecting the president to resign early. Maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's my conjecture, and that conjecture is based on the feel that I have of these times right now, which I felt also at the time of Nixon and the time that he resigned. And, the point is right now, between now and the election, the president has the most bargaining power to protect himself post-election. But if he doesn't cut a deal and soon, then he may just have to face the consequences. So we'll see. And Brendan says, Justin, be a nobleman, be a knight. The journey is arduous, but both worth it. And Jaguar focuses, okay, so no elections this year? No, I didn't say that. There's definitely going to be an election this year. What does this have to do with archetypes? Fair enough. What it has to do with archetypes is that the king or the leader or the chieftain or the president is a very definite archetype, both in the collective and in the individual. And so in the individual, that's the self. You can think of the self as your emperor, if you want to, or your king. But in the collective, it's normally a physical king. And then, but in the psyche, the king of kings is God. That's what God is. And so we're talking about, depending on the gender of the leader, it's either the Empress or the Emperor card in the Tarot, which is the 3rd and 4th cards of the Tarot, and therefore a very definite archetype. And Brendan says that he thinks I'm right, that a very high-ranking NSA officer speculated the same thing 6 hours ago. And we have Shrek Jr. saying Trump 2020. Well, we'll see. He's certainly hoping that he will win and not spend his declining years in orange, but I guess for somebody who is orange, that's not possible. But anyway, that's just a bad joke. And Jaguar Focus says, I don't see king archetype in most leaders. Well, anyway, that's what our human psyche substitutes for the king, whether it's whether they're worthy of our following or not. That's a different issue. Okay, so going on with this. Consciousness is phylogenetically and ontogenetically a secondary phenomenon. It is time this obvious fact were grasped at last. Just as the body has an anatomical prehistory of millions of years, so also does the psychic system. And just as the human body today represents in each of its parts the result of this evolution, and everywhere still shows traces of its earlier stages, so the same may be said of the psyche. Consciousness began its evolution from an animal-like state, which seems to us unconscious, and the same process of differentiation is repeated in every child. The psyche of the child in its preconscious state is anything but a tabula rasa. It is already preformed in a recognizably individual way and is moreover equipped with all specifically human instincts, as well as with the a priori foundations of the higher functions. Okay, so we've talked about this quite a lot. You know, we're all protected by the 2 million-year-old man, and we have instincts and that sort of thing that come with the kit. When we're born, we may be wild animals, which is what we are. We haven't been trained to do anything, but we have all the instincts. We started breathing every 12 times a minute from the time we were born. And so going on, unless there's comment, you can interrupt. On this complicated base, the ego arises. Throughout life, the ego is sustained by this base. When the base does not function, stasis ensues and then death. Its life and its reality are of vital importance. Compared to it, even the external world is secondary. For what does the world matter if the endogenous impulse to grasp it and manipulate it is lacking? In the long run, no conscious will can ever replace the life instinct. This instinct comes to us from within as a compulsion or will or command. And if, as has more or less been done from time immemorial, we give it the name of a personal demon, we are at least aptly expressing the psychological situation. And if by employing the concept of the archetype, we attempt to define a little more closely the point at which the demon grips us, we have not abolished anything, only approached closer to the source of life. And so the point is that, again, our heart beats 72 times a minute, and it does that from birth to death. And almost none of us, with the exception of Tibetan Buddhist monks, maybe, can actually stop our heart and then start it again. Okay, so anyway, it is only natural that I, as a psychiatrist, doctor of the soul, should espouse such a view, for I am primarily interested in how I can help my patients find their healthy base again. To do that, a great variety of knowledge is needed, as I have learned. Medicine in general has, after all, proceeded in like manner. It has not made its advances through the discovery of some single trick of healing, thus phenomenally simplifying its methods. On the contrary, it has evolved into a science of enormous complexity, not the least of the reasons being that it has made borrowings from all possible fields. Hence, I am not concerned with proving anything to other disciplines. I'm merely attempting to put their knowledge to good use in my own field. Naturally, it is incumbent upon me to report on such applications and their consequences, for certain new things come to light when one transfers the knowledge of one field to another and applies it in practice. Had X-rays remained the exclusive property of the physicists and not been applied in medicine, we would know far less. Then again, if radiation therapy has in some circumstances dangerous consequences, that is interesting to the physician, but it is not necessarily of interest to the physicist, who uses radiation in an altogether different manner and for other purposes. Nor will he think that the physician has poached upon his territory when the latter points out certain harmful or salutary properties of the invisible rays. So, this is the standard problem that Dr. Jung was having through his lifetime, where people were taking pot shots at his perspective of the psyche, and he was simply reporting his findings. This is what happens in the psyche, and so you can either agree or not agree, but it doesn't matter whether you agree or not agree, because the psyche itself is going to decide what the truth is, not you. And so go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say something. I recently came across the definition for cognitive dissonance. And this, I'll read it. It says, this is why people get upset when their beliefs are challenged. A mental construct occurs when a mental conflict occurs when beliefs are contradicted by new information. So I'm thinking there's a lot of focus on dealing with people's cognitive dissonance, which I'm thinking we could say is ego versus culture. And in other words, I'll have cognitive dissonance when I'm being treated unfairly by the workplace. And then I might get cognitive behavioral therapy to help me stay at my workstation. And Jung, what he's trying to take us to is not cognitive dissonance, not that that's not important, but how about we'd say he's working on addressing soul dissonance, where maybe we might say that it's self in conflict or trying to get to the, shall we say, the Holy Spirit, or to love.
Yeah. Well,
soul dissonance. And that's where I think people in the mainstream churches are having trouble, because you and I have today expressed that we have a soul dissonance with the message we've heard people deliver in many churches.
Yeah. But I mean, we can see a cognitive dissonance just on the street. If you go outside, you're going to see some people wearing masks and some not. And so there's a cognitive dissonance right there, where some people want to follow science and some don't. And, those that don't, if I were to guess, I would guess that those that don't are going to be more likely to not get their psyche into alignment because they might be dead. And I'm theorizing that because I stay at home with my wife and mother-in-law, that I will have a better chance of seeing the result of the COVID virus and be able to look at it in the rearview mirror, whereas those that don't take it seriously may not have a chance to have a rearview mirror. Right. So, in terms of what God or what this archetype means to you, it certainly has meaning to me. And, I very much hope that God will make it possible for more people to survive than not from the coronavirus. And I think that will happen, but I don't think that it will necessarily happen without some ugly times, bloody times between now and then. So it goes right back to Churchill's quote, Americans always find the right answer after trying everything else. So, I suppose you could say the same thing about Adolf Hitler. He found the right answer after trying a lot of things, but he didn't live to see the answer, and so he had other ideas. No more ideas. So anyway, reading on, I guess we'll go a little bit further here. Let's see. Okay, let me just read a half a page more and then we'll wrap it up. If I, for example, apply historical or theological insights in psychotherapy, they naturally appear in a different light and lead to conclusions other than those to which they lead when restricted to their proper fields, where they serve other purposes. The fact, therefore, that a polarity underlies the dynamics of the psyche means that the whole problem of opposites in its broadest sense, with all its concomitant religious and philosophical aspects, is drawn into the psychological discussion. These aspects lose the autonomous character they have in their own field, inevitably so, since they are approached in terms of psychological questions. That is, they are no longer viewed from the angle of religious or philosophical truth, but are examined for their psychological validity and significance. Leaving aside their claim to be independent truths, the fact remains that regarded empirically, which is to say scientifically, they are primarily psychic phenomena. This fact seems to me incontestable, that they claim a justification for themselves is in keeping with the psychological approach, which does not brand such a claim unjustified, but on the contrary, treats it with special consideration. Psychology has no room for judgments like only religious or only philosophical, despite the fact that we too often hear the charge of some things being only psychological, especially from theologians. And so I'll stop there, but do you have a comment on that last bit there?
Well, one thing that came into my mind for whatever reason, you've talked about the divine child, and I'm thinking that, I believe you've expressed, we all, whether you're male or female, we can all work to create our own divine child, and that can give us meaning and purpose in life. And you've created a divine child for your, I'm not saying this is necessarily where you're necessarily going to say I'm fulfilled, but 9,600 YouTube followers to tuning into these kinds of conversations is really an admirable divine child, in my opinion. And I'm really thinking of, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to put out there too, right? In my own unique context. So although as males, we don't have the biological capability to create a real child. We don't have the alchemical processes available to us.
Right.
We participate, but it's really, we have to admit, it's not much of an effort, right? Or
Right.
Being a good father is an important role. I'm not diminishing it, but I don't think it comes close to the mother archetype. It's important, but so anyway, I think men do need to, and not just men, but anyone who feels that they're needing to find that fulfillment. It is all about creating a divine child, as such as that might be. And
so here's a good question.
Fulfilled.
Here's a good question for you and Nick. Does the divine child act from intuition?
Sorry, hit the wrong button.
Yeah.
Well, I would say yes. I think it's very much about going into feeling and trying to, and going down to depth and brooding, as Craig Nelson recently said, brooding and incubating and cooking something out of the depth.
Sure.
So
it's about finding meaning in life, isn't it?
Right. And to just stay in the material world to do that, yeah, you could, there's some great inventions, right? So Steve Jobs, thank you, wherever you are. I still get amazed by this iPad to think that this little device. So that's a divine child worthy of great respect and tremendous positive contribution to the world. So
sure.
I guess, but somehow he must, I don't know, like where did he draw from to bring these technologies together? It's something magical about it.
Well, that's right. It is mystical. And, in the medieval times, people gave meaning to their life by contributing to the construction of a cathedral. And it came to me yesterday when I was talking that we can give meaning to our lives now by saving our lifeboat. Okay. In other words, there's almost nothing else more important than to contribute to the saving of Mother Earth, because we don't have any alternatives. If our mother dies, we all die, right? And so so maybe there haven't been, since the great cathedrals were built, maybe there haven't been these great projects that one could devote one's life to see through. And many of those cathedrals took 3 and 4 generations to build. But now it's not so much a question of building as saving and patching our leaky lifeboat. And we all know that now. Okay, there's no hiding from that fact, right? If you pay any attention at all, you know that we have no place else to go. And while it may be true, it is possible that human beings may be able to take human life and other life forms to another galaxy someday, many years in the future. And so that possibility can't be denied, but certainly in our lifetime and the lifetimes of our grandchildren, there are no second, there's no alternative living spaces. So we just must work on this project, and that it's a worthy project and a project that can give people meaning.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be a grandiose contribution. It can be simply being a friend to all of our relations and nature, and trying to be light on our footprint.
Yeah, it can be as simple as as recycling. But anyway, Sean says whenever Sean is just kidding us. Nancy says, Nancy first said, when we have a numinous experience for the first time, it can cause cognitive dissonance as the ego learns it's not the only captain in the psyche. Boy, that is for sure. You find out you're not the boss, and then you say, oh, okay, I got it now. And Sean says, whenever someone says mask, do you mean persona or face mask? I guess I mean both. And Sean says, my advice to anyone stuck in perturbation of thoughts, say this to yourself: all I know is that I know nothing. Yeah, that's probably the best way to be, because it's sure that no one person knows everything, and we don't know 99.9% of everything. The amount any one human being can know is very limited, but we can experience and thereby know. So Jaguar Focus suggests check out Men Talks on Channel Minnesota Men's Conference. Very, very, very eye-opening for men. Okay, well, I personally am beyond that stage of life, but certainly younger people should check out all different offerings in these regards and make your own judgment. Olaf refers to the theory of forms in Plato. Brendan says, Skip, did you hear about Nantes Cathedral? Nantes Cathedral. I was praying for you when I heard the news. No, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear about Nantes Cathedral. Did something happen, Brendan? And Jaguar, first step to saving Earth, stop using fossil fuels. Yep. That's going to have to take a wrench to a few knuckleheads to achieve that. Sean, my opinion is that all of us are innocent because none of us can know. Yeah, well, we can have a little bit higher knowing than others. And Brendan says, but none of us are accountable. Well, actually, we are accountable, and we are accountable to ourselves, and that's something that we have to be accountable to all the time. So if you're irresponsible, you can live a life that way, but it doesn't mean you'll have satisfaction at the end. And Sean says, okay, there's a private conversation here. Jaguar Focus says the unconscious seems to be more grandiose, and the answer is yes, it is. And Brendan says apparently Nantes Cathedral burned. I know you feel your connection with the deep European spiritual roots. Yeah. Okay, I'm not aware of that, but I will look into it, Brendan. That's a tragedy if it happened. I have no doubt that it happened. If you're telling me it happened, I'm sure it happened. But anyway, I'm sorry to hear that, and my condolences to the people of Nantes. But what I learned when Notre Dame burned is that nothing essential is lost. Yes, a few artworks are lost. Yes, beautiful artwork can be lost, but a cathedral can build again, and I'm sure it will build again. And the spirit is not touched by a fire. Fire is in the physical world, but the spirit that builds a cathedral is in the psyche, which is God's world. And so, so that couldn't be touched by the fire. And so I say both my condolences to the people of Nantes and congratulations, you now have something to put meaning to your life by rebuilding an important structure. So that's artisans get work kind of thing. So Nick, you've been awfully quiet tonight. I don't know if you're still there listening, but I'm going to call it a quits for tonight. So Miles, there's a lot of light on you. Is that just, is it dark outside in Calgary?
Not yet. It's still sunny out there. I'll just turn that camera around and
okay.
You
So
can see.
Yep. So sundown is coming soon, though. It's 8:17 where you are. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's why I keep this scene behind me, so I still feel there's daylight. I'm still in the light, even though.
Yeah, you just need some water sound effects, a little bit of splashing around every once in a while. We'll really get the feel for that. Beautiful lake.
I've been thinking of working on something more, but so far this is where we are. And so anyway, thank you, Miles, for being here, and thank you.
My
Nicholas.
pleasure. Thank you, Skip. Thank you everybody
Nicholas,
tuning in.
Yep. Thanks.
Oh, gee, Nick, you're waking up.
Oh no! I've been here all the time. Just that my Bluetooth speaker. I heard you called me just now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, no. I try to reach for the mic, but no, just some cock up. I've been here all the time, just listening. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So tomorrow we're having this conversation with Dr. John Jackson about the women of the Old Testament. And so it should be an interesting time. I've invited my two women friends who wrote the book about Lilith to join us. So that's Susan Scott and Susan Schwartz. And so
okay,
should be interesting. And if you can make it, please join us. And it will go ahead. What were we gonna...
No. Just saying. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a couple of other interesting speakers that are coming up. I had a yes, but we haven't scheduled yet with Dr. Randy Fertile, who in Jung's Red Book for Our Time wrote an essay which everybody who hates politics on this channel will love. That's called Trickster, His Apocalyptic Brother and a World's Unmaking, an Archetypal Reading of Donald Trump. That is the name of his essay. And so he will be speaking to us sometime soon. And also David Tacey from Australia, one of these Sunday mornings for you, Nick. It'll be he'll be talking to us, and he has written, well, he's sent me a list of his books, but let me see what I have here about it. Okay.
Sounds like quite a schedule, huh?
Yeah. So
With
anyway,
Marie Stein also. Yep.
yeah, and Ulanov this Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. So write to me if, and Brendan says, Dr. Randy Fertile, and I said, yes, definitely, Brendan, that's who it is, Dr. Randy Fertile. And David Tacey has written well, he's written Gods and Diseases, How to Read Jung, The Young Reader, The Idea of the Numinous, Jung in the New Age, Remaking Men, and Darkening Spirit, Jung Spirituality and Religion. And his most recent work is Religion as Metaphor. So he should be an interesting, he's emeritus professor of English. No, that's Dr. Fertile is a professor of English, but he's an analytical psychologist at La Trobe University in Australia. Okay, so I'll see you tomorrow for those of you who can join us for the Women of the Old Testament. It'll be good. If you can't join us, please watch it on playback. And I'm going to say good night to everybody. Peace.
Peace.
Good night. Peace. Good night, Skip. Good night, Mouse.
Good night.